Taormina is a small town on the east coast of the island of Sicily, Italy, midway between Messina and Catania. Taormina has been a tourist destination since the 19th century. Its beaches are accessible via an aerial tramway on the Ionian Sea and via highways from Messina in the north and Catania in the south. History. Ancient. The area around Taormina was inhabited by the Siculi even before the Greeks arrived on the Sicilian coast in 734 BC to found a town called Naxos. The theory that Taormina was founded by colonists from Naxos is confirmed by Strabo and other ancient writers. The new settlement seems to have risen rapidly to prosperity, and was apparently already a considerable town at the time of Timoleon's expedition in 345 BC. It was the first place in Sicily where that leader landed, having eluded the vigilance of the Carthaginians, who were guarding the Straits of Messina, and crossed direct from Rhegium to Taorminium. The city was at that time still under the government of Andromachus, whose mild and equitable administration is said to have presented a strong contrast with that of the despots and tyrants of the other Sicilian cities. He welcomed Timoleon with open arms, and afforded him a secure resting place until he was unable to carry out his plans in other parts of Sicily. Andromachus was not deprived of his position of power when all the other tyrants were expelled by Timoleon, but was permitted to retain it undisturbed till his death. Little is recorded about Taorminium for some time after this. It is probable that it passed under the authority of Agathocles, who drove the historian Timaeus into exile, and some time after this it was subject to a domestic despot of the name of Tindarion, who was contemporary with Hicetus of Syracuse and Finches of Agrigentum. Tindarion was one of those who concurred in inviting Pyrrhus into Sicily, and when that monarch landed with his army at Taorminium, joined him with all his forces, and supported him in his march upon Syracuse. A few years later we find that Taorminium had fallen into the power of Hieron of Syracuse, and was employed by him as a stronghold in the war against the Mamertines. It was also one of the cities which was left under his dominion by the treaty concluded with him by the Romans in 263 BC. There is no doubt that Taorminium continued to form a part of the kingdom of Syracuse until the death of Hieron, and that it only passed under the government of Rome when the whole island of Sicily was reduced to a Roman province, but we have scarcely any account of the part it took during the Second Punic War, though it would appear, from a hint in Appian, that it submitted to Marcellus on favorable terms, and it is probable that it was on that occasion it obtained the peculiarly favored position it enjoyed under the Roman dominion. For we learn from Cicero that Taorminium was one of the 3 cities in Sicily which enjoyed the privileges of a civitas foederata or allied city, thus retaining a nominal independence, and was not even subject, like Messina, to the obligation of furnishing ships of war when called upon. The city, however, suffered severe calamities during the Servile War in Sicily, having fallen into the hands of the insurgent slaves, who, on account of the great strength of its position, made it one of their chief posts, and were able for a long time to defy the arms of the consul Publius Rupilius. They held out until they were reduced to the most fearful extremities by famine, when the citadel was at length betrayed into the hands of the consul by one of their leaders named Serapion, and the whole of the survivors put to the sword. Taorminium again played a conspicuous part during the wars of Sextus Pompeius in Sicily, and, from its strength as a fortress, was one of the principal points of the position which he took up in 36 BC, for defense against Octavian. It became the scene also of a sea fight between a part of the fleet of Octavian, commanded by the Triumvir in person, and that of Pompeius, which terminated in the defeat and almost total destruction of the former. In the settlement of Sicily after the defeat of Pompeius, Taorminium was one of the places selected by Augustus to receive a Roman colony. probably as a measure of precaution, on account of the strength of its situation. As we are told that he expelled the former inhabitants to make room for his new colonists. Strabo speaks of it as one of the cities on the east coast of Sicily that was still subsisting in his time, though inferior in population both to Messana and Catana. Both Pliny and Ptolemy assign it the rank of a colonia, and it seems to have been one of the few cities of Sicily that continued under the Roman Empire to be a place of some consideration. Its territory was noted for the excellence of its wine, and produced also a kind of marble which seems to have been highly valued. Juvenal also speaks of the sea off its rocky coast as producing the choicest mullets. The itineraries placed Taormina 32 miles from Messina, and the same distance from Catania. Middle Ages and Modern Era. After the fall of the Western Roman Empire, Taormina continued to rank as one of the more important towns of Sicily, and because of the strength of its position was one of the last places that was retained by the Eastern Roman emperors, but it was taken by the Arabs in 962 after a siege of 33 weeks. Taormina was renamed Al-Mu'izziyah in honor of Imam al-Mu'izz, who was a Fatimid caliph. Muslim rule of the town lasted until 1078, when it was captured by the Norman Count Roger I of Sicily. After the fall of the Normans and of their heirs, the Hohenstaufen, Taormina followed the history of Sicily under the Angevins and then the Crown of Aragon. In 1410 King Martin II of Sicily was elected here by the Sicilian Parliament. Later Taormina was under Spanish suzerainty, receiving the status of city in the 17th century. In 1675 it was besieged by the French, who had occupied Messina. Under the Bourbons dynasty of the Kingdom of Two Sicilies, Taormina did not have a relevant role. However, it obtained an easier access when part of the Catrabico promontory was partially cut and a seaside road connecting it to Messina and Catania was created. It received also a station on the second oldest railroad in the region. Starting from the 19th century, Taormina became a popular tourist resort in the whole of Europe. People who visited Taormina include Oscar Wilde, Nicholas I of Russia, Johann Wolfgang von Goethe, Friedrich Nietzsche, Richard Wagner and many others. Contemporary age. In the late 19th century, Taormina gained further prominence as the place where Wilhelm von Gloeden worked most of his life as a photographer of predominantly male nudes. There is some speculation about Taormina being an early gentleman's destination. Also credited for making Taormina popular was Otto Gelleng, best known in his hometown of Berlin for his fine paintings, which he composed and painted in Italy but exhibited in Germany. What distinguishes Gelleng, however, is his choice to depict the more southern regions where he captured the spectacular views and light of Sicily. He often painted the area's Greek colonial ruins, including Taormina. Taormina's first important tourist was Johann Wolfgang Goethe, who dedicated exalting pages to the city in his book entitled Italian Journey. But perhaps it was Gelleng's views that made its beauty talked about throughout Europe and turned the site into a famous tourist center. The artist arrived in Sicily at the age of 20 in search of new subjects for his paintings. On his way through Taormina he was so enamored by the landscape that he decided to stop for part of the winter. Gelleng began to paint everything that Taormina offered: ruins, sea, mountains, none of which were familiar to the rest of Europe. When his paintings were later exhibited in Berlin and Paris, many critics accused Gelleng of having an unbridled imagination. At that, Gelleng challenged them all to go to Taormina with him, promising that he would pay everyone's expenses if he were not telling the truth. During the early 20th century the town became a colony of expatriate artists, writers, and intellectuals. Albert Stopford grew roses in his Edwardian garden. D.H. Lawrence stayed at the Fontana Vecchia from 1920 to 1922. 30 years later, from April 1950 through September 1951, the same villa was home to Truman Capote. who wrote of his stay in the essay Fontana Vecchia. Also Tennessee Williams, John Cocteau and Jean Marais visited the place. Charles Webster Leadbetter, the theosophical author, found out that Taormina had the right magnetic fields for Jiddu Krishnamurti to develop his talents. So the young Krishnamurti dwelt here from time to time. Halldór Laxness, the Icelandic author and Nobel Prize winner, worked here on the first modern Icelandic novel, Their Fair and Meek Life Rakasmur. By this time Taormina had become a polite synonym for Sodom, as Harold Acton described it. Later, however, after the Second World War, Acton was visiting Taormina with Evelyn Waugh and, coming upon a board advertising Ye Olde English Teas, he sighed and commented that Taormina was now quite as boring as Bournemouth. Main sites. Archaeology. The present town of Taormina occupies the ancient site on a lofty hill which forms the last projecting point of the mountain ridge that extends along the coast from Cape Pelorus to this point. The site of the old town is about 250 meters above the sea, while a very steep and almost isolated rock, crowned by a Saracen castle, rises about 150 meters higher. This is undoubtedly the site of the ancient arx or citadel, the inaccessible position of which is repeatedly alluded to by ancient writers. Portions of the ancient walls may be traced at intervals all round the brow of the hill, the whole of the summit of which was evidently occupied by the ancient city. Numerous fragments of ancient buildings are scattered over its whole surface, including extensive reservoirs of water, sepulchres, tessellated pavements, etc., and the remains of a spacious edifice, commonly called a naumachia, but the real purpose of which it is difficult to determine. But by far the most remarkable monument remaining at Taormina is the ancient theatre, which is one of the most celebrated ruins in Sicily, on account both of its remarkable preservation and its beautiful location. It is built for the most part of brick, and is therefore probably of Roman date, though the plan and arrangement are in accordance with those of Greek, rather than Roman, theatres, whence it is supposed that the present structure was rebuilt upon the foundations of an older theatre of the Greek period, with a diameter of 109 meters. This theatre is the second largest of its kind in Sicily. It is frequently used for operatic and theatrical performances and for concerts. The greater part of the original seats have disappeared, but the wall which surrounded the whole cavea is preserved, and the proscenium with the back wall of the scena and its appendages, of which only traces remain in most ancient theatres, are here preserved in singular integrity, and contribute much to the picturesque effect, as well as to the interest, of the ruin. From the fragments of architectural decorations still extant we learn that it was of the Corinthian order, and richly ornamented. Some portions of a temple are also visible, converted into the Church of San Pancrazio, but the edifice is of small size. Others: Palazzo Corvaggia, Baroque fountain, Church of San Domenico, Anglican Church of St. George. Culture and tourism. Just south of Taormina is the Isola Bella, a nature reserve, and further south, situated beside a bay, is the popular seaside resort of Giardini Naxos. Tours of the Capo Sant'Andrea grottos are also available. The village of Taormina is perched on a cliff overlooking the Ionian Sea. Besides the ancient Greek theatre, it has many old churches, lively bars, fine restaurants, and antique shops. Taormina is approximately a 45-minute drive away from Europe's largest active volcano, Mount Etna. Icelandic writer Halldór Laxness, who won the Nobel Prize for Literature in 1955, wrote most of his first novel, Their Fair and Meek Life Rakasmur, in Taormina, which he then praised highly in his book of autobiographical essays, Skaldutimi. Between 1948 and 1999, the English writer Daphne Phelps lived in the Casa Cuzzini designed and built by Robert Hawthorne Kitson in 1905, and entertained various friends including Bertrand Russell, Roald Dahl, Henry Faulkner, and Tennessee Williams. The British songwriter Mark Knopfler evokes the town in his song, Lights of Taormina, extracted from his 2015 album Tracker. Events. Many exhibitions and events are organized during the summer in Taormina. The exceptional stage for pop and classical concerts, opera and important performances often recorded by television is the Ancient Theatre. Since 1983, the most important performances are realized by Taormina Art, the cultural institution which organizes one of the most famous music, theatre and dance festivals. Within the program of Taormina Art there is the Taormina Film Fest, the well-known cinema festival. The heir of the Cinema Festival of Messina and Taormina, dating from 1960, which for about 20 years has hosted the David of Donatello Awards with the participation of the most famous Italian film stars. During the Taormina Film Fest the Silver Ribbons are now awarded, a prize created by Italian film journalists. Since 2005, in October, Taormina Art has organized the Giuseppe Sinopoli Festival, a festival dedicated completely to the great conductor, who died in 2001 and was for many years the artistic director of Taormina Art. Famous people: Tindarian Tyrant of Taormina, Francesco Buzzuro guitarist. Gallery: Piazza Ix Aprile. Nighttime in Taormina. Taormina attracts tourists and visitors all year round. One of the many antique shops in Taormina. Exterior of Corvaggia Palace. A traversa in Taormina. Taormina is seen from the Greek theatre with Mount Etna in the background. Greek-Roman theatre. Ruins of Greek theatre at Taormina. Painting by Hungarian painter Tivadar Koskar C. Sonveri.